Hi, my name's Mark. I'm one of the pastors at Trillium. There's a wonderful story near the end of the Gospel of Luke called this Journey to Emmaus. It's about two disciples, Cleopas and an unnamed disciple, who on Easter morning go home. They go back home to Emmaus, about 7 miles outside of Jerusalem. And the story of Emmaus actually comes after the story of the women who go to the tomb early Easter morning to find the stone rolled back, the body of Jesus missing, and they have an angelic visitation. And the angels say, "He is alive. He's not here. He's risen." And the women run back to the disciples and they report this. And some of the disciples go down and take a look, and it's exactly as the women say. And so there's a real buzz going on in the community of Jesus on Easter morning. And it's in that moment that Cleopas and the other disciple decide to leave. And when I'm thinking about this, I'm kind of puzzled. Why would they leave? It makes no sense. Leaving Friday night on Good Friday after Jesus has been crucified and is dead, well, that makes a lot of sense to me. Or leaving on the Saturday. You know, everybody's heartbroken, depressed, but there's no point staying around anymore. It's over. But Easter morning, there's this new data, there's new information that at least puts a bit of a question mark on what's going on. So why would you leave in that moment? And I think the reason for this is that Cleopas and the other disciple have an operating hypothesis, a theory. And it goes like this: once dead, always dead. Dead bodies stay dead. And so there's no reason for them to stay. Even with the new data and the question mark, there's no reason to stay. The hypothesis is still in operation. The theory of life is still in effect. And of course, in the story, the irony is, as Cleopas and his companion begin their journey back to Emmaus, at some point, who comes alongside of them but Jesus, raised from the dead? But it says in the scriptures, their eyes were restrained from recognizing him. And so they don't see him as he is. He's just a stranger. And yet this stranger begins to teach them about the scriptures, about how the Messiah must first suffer before coming into his glory, so that by the time they get to Emmaus, they've had this whole new set of data given to them. And yet they still do not recognize Jesus for who he is. At that moment, Cleopas and his companion invite Jesus in to have a meal with them. And it's only in the breaking of the bread, only in that triggering moment, some recognition in the breaking of bread, that finally Cleopas and the other disciple see Jesus, raised from the dead. They finally recognize him. The new data has come in, and an old hypothesis, once dead, always dead, has been changed out for a new hypothesis: Jesus Christ risen from the dead. Now, people tend to believe what they already believe, and we tend to conform data and new information to what it is we already believe. In fact, one of the sad parts of life for all people, Christians, non-Christians, believers, non-believers, is that we tend to make data and information serve our operating hypotheses and theories. So it's hard for us to change because of this. It's hard for new information to break in. We believe what we want to believe, and we don't believe what we don't want to believe. And when new information comes to us, it's so easy for us to simply displace it to the side or ignore it or reject it. The early church had its understanding of life and death and life after death turned on its head in the reality of the resurrected Jesus. He reorientates their operating hypothesis in life. And I'm thinking to myself, as a modern person, what is my operating hypothesis or theories about life that get in the way of me fully embracing the witness of the early church that Jesus was raised from the dead? Because I think a fair evaluation of all the information, all the evidence, all the data around the resurrection of Jesus makes the case for his resurrection very strong. And yet so many still disbelieve. I suppose it comes down to what we think is possible or impossible. You know, a great quote from Sherlock Holmes, he says this: once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. Once you eliminate the impossible hypothesis or theory, whatever remains, no matter how improbable the theory or the hypothesis is, it must be true. And so the question is, again, what is possible and what is impossible? Jesus once said, in one of his teachings, he said this. He said, "For mortals it is impossible, but for God all things are possible." I think Jesus proved this in his own life through the reality of his death and resurrection, that what is impossible for mortals is fully possible for God.